You're listening to the 49 Carats Podcast, a 49ers Goldmine production with Stephanie Sanchez.
What's going on, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the 49 Carats Podcast. I'm your host, Steph, and we just finished watching day 2 of the NFL draft. And this was kind of day 1 for the 49ers, but very exciting stuff. They picked 3 players, and to talk all about it, I am joined here with Niners Nation Akash. I've been wanting to get Akash on the pod for quite some time now, and I'm very excited that we're able to do it today, talking about some of these players. How you doing, Akash?
Fantastic. Super pumped. One of the OGs, Steph. We used to go all the way back to our 49ers hub days. So shout out. Appreciate you for having me. 49ers finally made some picks.
They did. And let's look at some of those picks. So the 49ers made 3 picks today. They didn't make any trades, so that was kind of new for us. We were kind of sweating a little bit, seeing if they do something exciting. But what's exciting is some of the players that they got. And who I like the most, pick 61 here, USC defensive end Drake Jackson. We'll just go right in and start talking about him. I mean, I love this pick. I think for when they got him, they stayed pat at 61, and we just heard John Lynch talking about him and how they were tempted to move up for him, and I don't blame them. I really feel like Drake Jackson landed in the perfect situation with the 49ers, and the 49ers landed in the perfect situation being able to draft him. He's fast. He has a crazy nice bend, quick get off. He wins with speed. And I think that's what they were missing with D Ford, right? When D Ford got hurt and, he's out of the picture now, that's really what they were missing. And we saw how effective Nick Bosa was with D Ford opposite him. And so I'm excited to see what Drake Jackson brings. 87.7 pass rush grade in 2021, ranked 3rd among Pac-12 edge rushers. 26 quarterback pressures, and in 166 pass rush attempts. And John Lynch called them incredibly disruptive. What did you think about this pick, Akash?
I think, we talk about the 49ers defensive line all the time, and we talk about how deep that group is, but then you dig into it, and they've got a lot of edge rushers that are on one-year deals, right? Charles Omenihu, Kerry Hyder, Jordan Willis. And these are guys that come in for a year, work with Chris Kosarek, are extremely productive, and generally leave for bigger deals just because they price themselves out of the 49ers budget. And we always talk about, okay, can the 49ers find an edge rusher that's young, opposite of Nick Bosa? And when you look at Drake Jackson, honestly, it reminds me a lot of D Ford, someone that's undersized, a designated pass rusher, someone that has elite bend around the edge. And I talked to a few people who really watch edge rushers, and they tell me, he's got all the right tools. He's just got to develop some pass rush moves, develop some counters. And who better to do that than Chris Kosarek and getting to work with Nick Bosa and the likes of the other guys on this defensive line. So I think it's a fantastic pick. I think, we talked a lot about interior offensive line, safety, center. And I think the 49ers just sat back, waited, and they picked the best player on their board at 61, and that happened to be Jackson. And the other thing is he's 21 years old. He just turned 21. So extremely young guy, has freak athleticism. Typically with an edge rusher, you look at their broad jump and their vertical jump to see what their burst or their get off is like. And he was in the 90th percentile. I saw you put up the spider graph earlier. And, I just think he's going to develop into something that, the 49ers desperately needed, which is a long-term plan opposite of Nick Bosa. So good pick there.
Yeah, and I agree on some of the things that he needs to work on. When I watched him, I felt like he could be more consistent, and I feel like if he just builds on some of the moves that he already has, I mean, we already talked about the bend that he has, that he can win with speed, but if he can work on, being able to be more consistent and build on some of those, I think the ceiling is very high. And like we said, Chris Kosarek is the perfect guy to be able to mold him into a star. So I'm very, very excited about this pick. And as John Lynch said, his best football is ahead of him. I truly believe that as well. So great pick on the 49ers part. What do you think this means for the rest of the defensive line, though? I know some people were saying that this means now that Eric Armstead is going to be able to play on the interior permanently. And I think that's a very good thing for the 49ers.
Absolutely. Eric Armstead, especially this season and the latter half of the season from basically week 8 onwards when he moved basically to the inside playing that 3 technique, he was just fantastic. And since you got drafted, we always talked about how that was kind of his role in this 4-3 defense. And he really found his footing this past season. And I think, the easiest way to keep him there is make sure you have good depth at edge. And they certainly did that. They went ahead and signed Kerry Hyder this offseason. They added Kimoko Toure, who I didn't even mention. That was kind of a late signing here in free agency. Now they drafted Drake Jackson. Honestly, I think the competition at defensive line is going to be phenomenal during training camp because someone's bound to get cut / traded. I mean, they just don't have enough spots on the roster, which is a great problem to have. And, the name that kind of jumps out to me is Samson Ebukam, right? He's due $8.5 million roughly, I think. And a lot of that is non-guaranteed money. And I think the 49ers can save roughly $5-6 million in cap space if they were to move on from him. So, does this type of a move kind of, put Ebukam and his large cap hit, under the spotlight? I know they did like how he came along kind of in the second half of the season. So we'll see where that goes. But you can never have enough pass rushers in this league. And the 49ers have once again, shown that they believe defensive line, pass rush, edge rushers, get after the quarterback, get up the field. That's what they believe in. And that's what they showed with pick 61.
Right, exactly. Because a lot of people were thinking maybe they would go safety, but the pass rush helps the secondary a lot. I mean, we saw that in 2019 as well. And as far as odd man out go, I think Ebukam is definitely the top of that list just based on how much he makes. But at the same time, they don't have to release him. They can always trade him because
also true.
He is good, so you might as well try to get something back for him. But yeah, overall, love that move, and love how this defensive line is looking. Now let's talk about the second pick that they made.
I love how the tone changed there.
You know where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
This one was a bit of a head scratcher for me. Ty Davis-Price, running back out of LSU. And the reason that this is a head scratcher is because the 49ers just came off of the 2021 draft where they picked up 2 running backs, most notably Trey Sermon, who they picked, I believe, at the 3rd round as well. Who didn't even see that much time last year. So all around kind of head scratcher. I wonder if this is a reflection of how they feel about Trey Sermon. But in hearing what Kyle Shanahan had to say, it sounds like, maybe they just feel like they didn't have enough running backs. He said you can never have too many. Sure. But I wonder about, well, did you need to draft one in the 3rd round? That's what I wonder. So what do you think about this one? Are you just as confused as I am?
I think, as soon as they made the pick, a lot of people seem to get a little antsy because the kiss of death for Kyle Shanahan and John Lynch seems to be a running back on day 2, right? Joe Williams, Trey Sermon, and now Ty Davis-Price. And hopefully Davis-Price can buck the trend. But, I didn't have a problem with the position per se, because if you look back to last season, Elijah Mitchell, as good of a season as he had, he was banged up a lot too. He battled a lot of injuries. He played through some of them. Trey Sermon didn't really come on. He was also hurt at some point. Jermichael Hasty just, didn't bring as much juice as we thought. Jeff Wilson Jr. coming off of that knee injury, kind of the same deal. And as Kyle Shanahan just alluded to in his post-draft press conference, they had to go and sign running backs off of other teams' practice squads mid-season, despite, having 4 or 5 guys going into the season. And this doesn't even include Raheem Mostert, who was the starter going into last season. So I think they just look at it like, we just had a ton of injuries. We're not really sure if we just have one guy that we can depend on. So, how are we going to address this position? We just continue to add guys, on day 2 and day 3 that we like, that we think fits the system. And the one thing you could say about Davis-Price, extremely physical runner. I will not even lie. I had no idea who he was until the 49ers picked him, because I don't think, you do a fantastic job of tracking visits. I don't think he took a visit. They had a lot of running backs come and visit, but I don't think Davis Price was one of them, or at least I don't remember him being on the list. And so when they picked him, I was like, who the hell is this? And then you look up, you go through his highlights or whatever, you just see physical, violent runner, more of an inside runner than an outside zone runner, which could indicate a scheme change. New running backs coach with Anthony Lynn. So maybe a little changing of the guard here and how they scout the running back position. But we'll see. We'll see. I thought there were some other names on the board that they could go. I know Brian Robinson was still on the board, the running back from Alabama. Jerome Ford, the running back from Cincinnati, was still there. So there were some other guys that I thought if they had taken, fans would have felt better about it. And I think it was a combination of the player and the position, and people were just like, oh, man.
Well, not just that, when they took him. I mean, to me, I would have been totally fine if they took a running back. In fact, I expected it, but I expected it like on day 3. And I think that would have been a little bit better. But I mean, to the point of had they visited with him, they did. They actually did have a top 30 visit with him. And that was one of the more like recent ones that came out, at least that we heard about maybe like a week or 2 ago. But yeah, I mean, I just want to talk about the point that you mentioned, that, he had 211 carries, which I think is notable because you mentioned the fact Elijah Mitchell, he got banged up quite a bit because they used him a lot last year. And Jeff Wilson Jr. coming off his injury. And this is part of the reason that Deebo Samuel had to work as a running back so much, because it was out of necessity. The running game had no juice, okay, before Deebo Samuel started, taking 5 carries or more per game. So I think it bodes well that Davis Price, at least, it looks like he can handle a large workload. So that makes me feel a little bit better. But we'll see what happens. I mean, so someone asked him, like, was this move related to Deebo Samuel at all and taking the load off of him? And Kyle Shanahan said it could definitely help. So sure. I mean, if this helps, okay. If this makes Deebo happy, okay.
It's hard to get a feel for running backs when they get drafted, because last year, if you asked us at this time, you and I would have been like, man, Trey Sermon is going to pop off next season. And then they've got Elijah Mitchell, who could be, coming down the pipeline, and it was completely the reverse last season. So it's just so hard to tell. It's one of those positions that translates easy from college to the pros, just given the similarities, at both levels. But just some guys just have the vision right out of the gates, and they have the burst at the NFL level. And we'll see if Davis Price is able to do that. I just think people see day 2 running back and Kyle Shanahan, and they just go, oh, man. So we'll see if Davis Price can break that mold.
Oh, man, because it's not just the fact that they've had the history of the bad day 2 running backs. It's the fact that you're Kyle freaking Shanahan. You can make like any running back look good, apparently, except the ones you draft on day 2. Those are like the only ones you can't make look good for some reason. But moving on here, the last pick that we learned about, the 49ers selected at pick 105, SMU wide receiver Danny Gray. Man, okay, this one made me feel better. I was like, okay, we're back on track. Now we're talking. I was like, I love this pick. Leading up to the draft, he did have a visit with the 49ers as well. And so the interest was, you can tell that it was there. And so, I kind of could see this coming. And I'm excited about this one. He is fast. He is fast. And now that we have a quarterback who can throw downfield, that's very exciting. But he can work well with yards after the catch as well. He has good ball tracking ability. And Kyle Shanahan said he feels good about his skill set. What do you think about Danny Gray? Have you watched him a bit?
I'd call this the 49ers Twitter draft pick, because it felt like if there was one player that all of us kind of were like, they could take this guy, it felt like it was Danny Gray in the 3rd round. Because I think Matt Barrows, maybe like a month or 2 ago, just talked about some draft crushes. that he could see the 49ers taking. I think he had both Drake Jackson and Danny Gray on there. So shout out to Barrows. But that's the first time I had heard of his name. And so you just throw on some highlights and you're like, damn, this guy is blazing. And then he runs a 4.33 40-yard dash. And I think that was the second fastest of all wide receiver prospects. I think like Tyquan Thornton was faster. So blazing speed kills. And, typically you think of speed and you're like, okay, we're just going to throw go routes to this guy. And that's not the case with Danny Gray. He was, I think, 5th in yards after catch per reception among all wide receiver prospects as well. So you can throw him the ball and he has the speed to run away from defenders, which is also important. So that's a skill he shares with other receivers on the 49ers roster already. But I think this is a role that Kyle Shanahan likes to have. Typically, it's been a veteran, right? It's been Travis Benjamin in the past. They've had some other, veterans that he signed from previous stops earlier in his 49ers tenure. And now they just decided to go, draft this guy. 4.33 speed. He's going to be blazing. And, if Trey Lance has a cannon, I would not be surprised to see Danny Gray on the receiving end of some bombs from Lance.
I think that's what's so exciting is it's the possibilities. And now we can think about it. It's like the blue sky, anything is possible.
It's just a threat of speed, right? We're not saying they're just going to go bombs away, but now you have the threat of speed taking the top off defenses. Now all of a sudden that opens up the middle. You get George Kittle working over the middle. You get Brandon Ayuk, hopefully Deebo Samuel when he gets over his stuff, and all of a sudden the middle of the field opens. And it becomes a complete game changer. So hopefully Danny Gray here can develop into something. It looked like the 49ers were looking for speed at the receiver position all off season, just based off of some of the guys they were interested in free agency, etc. And they land one in the draft.
It makes sense. It makes sense because I feel like defenses were really starting to like key in on the middle of the field. And it makes sense. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo, not so scary of a quarterback. He's going to work in that middle of the field most of the time. And I mean, Trey Lance might do the same. I mean, those plays are still going to be there in Kyle Shanahan's offense, even with Trey Lance. And so I think adding more speed, being able to take the top off of the defense. Yes, more middle of the field action. And that is where this offense works. That's where it's dangerous. So I love that. All right. So how would you grade these 3 picks so far as a whole?
Ooh, that's a good question. I'd probably go B minus, maybe. Probably a B. Just because I thought the Drake Jackson pick was really solid. It was a player that I think has first-round talent, but probably just slid because of a lack of production, right? He played for multiple different staffs at USC, had some weight fluctuation, working between 240 and 275. So naturally, the production wasn't there to push him into the first round. So he fell to 61, and I think the 49ers can really develop him into a contributor on the defensive line. The second pick there, Ty Davis-Price, I really... I understand the thought of adding a running back. I just don't know if that's the player you'd want to add there, especially at 93, especially with who was there, right? Safety Nick Cross was there. Safety Kirby Joseph was there. David Bell, the wide receiver from Purdue. All 3 of those players got taken in the immediate 5 picks after Davis-Price. So I hope it's not something we look back on and be like, damn, they could have had one of those guys instead. Right. And so that pick kind of questionable. Danny Gray, again, I think, just like you mentioned, they just got right back on track. So, I think it was just a solid draft. I think they had some need. We think they still have some needs, right? Interior offensive line, safety that they haven't addressed yet. So I'd probably in B minus. What would you grade them?
I'm right there with you. I think had I liked the pick at 93 a little more, I'd give it an AA plus. But because of that one, because I'm a little still confused, I'm gonna say B. But you did mention that they haven't gone safety, they haven't gotten a center who we were expecting them to at this point, especially with Alex Mack apparently still no final decision from his part. Lynch described it as fluid, but Lynch also said that they collected all the info they needed coming into the draft. I'm not sure what that means in terms of what his decision is as far as Alex Mack goes, but what do you think we can expect on day 3 of the draft?
maybe the 49ers believe that they can still sign someone like JC Treader after the draft. Maybe they
But I think
believe that they can
no.
move Daniel Brunskill to center if need be. I think they really do like Jake Brendel, right? Brunskill started, I think, 8 or 9 games for the 49ers at center. So he has some experience playing there, which probably tells you that they like Jalen Moore at right guard, and then Aaron Banks at left guard, which is scary if you've got a rookie, second-year quarterback, basically a rookie quarterback at under center, because now you've got a brand new starter at left guard, someone that doesn't have much experience playing center, and then a brand new starter at right guard. And so that gives you a little bit of a pause, if you're the 49ers. But I think maybe they believe they could still add someone like JC Treader, and there's still tons of guys, I think, on day 3 that they could add. I think Donovan West, the center from Arizona, still hasn't gone. Jason Poe, the guard from Mercer, who is a load and can move, he's still available. So I think there's some guys they can add. I think John Lynch kind of alluded to that. He's like, yeah, we still got picks. We'll address those needs. It's maybe, and clearly the way they've gone about safety tells you how they feel about their room. I think they really do believe in Talanoa Hufanga, and George Odom is someone they believe is just not a special teams player, but can also contribute at safety. I think Tarvarius Moore, who will be coming back off the Achilles injury, is also someone that can contribute. I think the door for Jaquaski Tart is probably closed, but I think on the outside, we probably think, man, they don't have anybody at center or safety, but clearly the team just kind of views it differently, and they've kind of proven that with how they've drafted some of these players.
Yeah, I think I'd be more worried about center than safety, because safety, I mean, they have like this dominant defensive line, and like if they can just get some good pass rush, your secondary isn't going to have to cover for that long. It's like they'll be fine. And so you think the door is closed on Tart? You don't think they might bring him back after the draft if they don't get any safeties in this draft?
I believe the door is closed there. I actually really, really like Kwaski Tart. I think he's undervalued just as a player. I think people just remember him face down at SoFi Stadium after he dropped the arm punt from Matt Stafford. But I think he's just a fundamentally sound player, and at safety especially, you want chemistry with your partner, and Ward and Tart just seem to work really well together. But I do think they just go in a different direction. And you kind of saw that with Talanoa Hufanga last season, right? They tended to play him more as the season went on, even with Tart being healthy. So I can see him, being inserted into that role, and then having Odom and Moore compete for the other spot. So I think that's how they kind of approach it. Because, you look at day 3 safeties, and I'm not sure who's left that they would take, all the names that we talked about.
Marquise Bell. That's my guy.
Clearly you got a favorite.
That's my sleeper. That's my sleeper pick.
Okay, well, I will pay attention to that. I know Leon O'Neal Jr., who Javi talks about all the time, still left. So, I'm sure there's players that they would try to add, but clearly they don't value it as much as, folks like us on the outside talk about it. We were like safety center, and they just didn't address it.
Exactly. Really quickly before we get you out of here, some final thoughts on Debo, because Kyle Shanahan and Lynch were just asked a couple of questions about him. I thought one thing was interesting that Shanahan said he hadn't talked to Debo in a couple of weeks. Should that concern us at all? I'm like, if there's anyone who can mend this situation at this point, I feel like it is Kyle Shanahan. And why has he not talked to him in a couple of weeks?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised, because I'm sure they've been just knee deep in draft preparation, right? Because if you're, Kyle Shanahan, the coaching staff, you don't get into these draft prospects till after the season ends, and their season didn't end until late January. So now you have basically 2.5 months to go through all these prospects. So I'm sure he was just knee deep in visits and meetings and watching tape. So, I don't think they seriously considered trading Debo Samuel based off of the offers that were reported by Matt Barrows earlier today, and based off of basically what he said, right? He was like, yeah, no, we weren't going to. And it sounds like, based off of his tone, what he's saying is, he's like, let's just let the draft end. Let's let this calm down. The media stuff slows down after the draft, because we get into like mid-May here. For a few weeks, there's not much going on. And so we'll just stop talking about Debo Samuel here. Let the cooler heads prevail, like Eric Armstead said earlier this morning. And I'm sure at that point, when contract extension talks, resume, they'll see if they can try to get something done between the two sides, or, whatever happens, happens. He kind of left all doors open, which I get, right? You don't know what's going to happen, but it sounds like they have a good relationship. We knew that from the season. And so I wasn't too worried when he was like, I haven't talked to Deebo Samuel in a few weeks. It's just, I'm sure they'll get to it post draft.
Yeah, I always feel better about when Kyle Shanahan talks about these things rather than John Lynch, which I feel it should be the other way around, but
It's
I don't know.
authentic when Kyle says it.
Yeah, and I don't know. He said they think they can work things out with Deebo, to which Grant Cohn asked, why do you think you can work things out? And Kyle Shanahan said, because we can. Which I thought was funny. I mean, he seems very confident, and I think that's great. Obviously, that makes me feel better. If Kyle Shanahan feels better about this, then okay. So do I. Let's take a deep breath. It's all going to be okay. Any last thoughts about the draft? Do you have any day 3 players that you like or you want them to target?
Day 3 players. This draft's been weird. Probably because they started picking at 61, and now and then you have the Jimmy Garoppolo drama and the Deebo Samuel stuff, and the draft just feels very uninteresting to me this year for whatever reason. Maybe it's because we had Trey Lance last year to talk about, in the lead up, and so day 3 prospects haven't paid much attention to it. Jason Poe is the one that continues to stand out. I think you were the one that kind of put me on it because I saw your tweet about the visit, and I was like, let's look this guy up. He's nice. A freak athlete. So that would be a cool day 3 addition, but just interested to see how they attack the different positions and where they think there's needs, because it's a really good roster and they've got 76 or 77 guys signed already, and they still have 6 picks tomorrow. So how do they use those picks? Do they move up for someone they like? Do they stay put, kind of address different positions? Just kind of interested to see how it folds out. Usually, day 3 is just go, go, go with these picks.
Yeah, it is. It'll be much more exciting and faster paced, I'm sure. Akash, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I'm glad we were able to do this, and we'll definitely have to have you on the show again. But yeah, everyone listening or watching, make sure you like this video, subscribe to the channel. We have a lot of great content for you. I'll be on with Rohan tomorrow. All right. Enjoy the draft tomorrow. Enjoy your night. Peace.